So before understanding about pedigree analysis, we will understand what are the different categories of genetic disorder. Genetic disorders are of two types. They are Mendelian disorder and chromosomal disorder. So this video will only concentrate on the Mendelian disorder. So what is a Mendelian disorder? Mendelian disorder where there is an alteration there is an alteration or mutation happening in a single gene. And this Mendelian disorder follows the Mendel's inheritance law. Mendel's law of inheritance. Okay. Then, under Mendelian disorders, we have different types. Mendelian disorders are further classified as, they are of two types. One is autosomal disorder. The other one is sex-linked disorder. So in autosomal disorder, we have further two types. It can be autosomal dominant disorder. So autosomal dominant disorder or autosomal recessive disorder. So here in sex-linked disorder, we have the X-linked disorder. In sex-linked disorder, again we have two types. It can be X-linked recessive. The other can be X-linked dominant also, but we only talk about X-linked recessive. So the three patterns we are going to see under Mendelian's disorder is going to be autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive disorder and X-linked recessive disorder. So first we will start with autosomal recessive disorder. So now the Mendelian disorders, to understand how these disorders are taking place in a particular family, for that we have to put a heredity chart or a family chart. That is the pedigree analysis. So Mendelian disorders, all these disorders can be understood, or we can understood in the sense we can see how it is transmitted from one generation to another generation with the help of a pedigree analysis. Understand using pedigree analysis. So this pedigree, mainly the Mendelian disorders. Pedigree analysis. So pedigree analysis is nothing but a tree. It's a family tree showing the heredity or having the information related to how the diseases or this Mendelian disorder diseases are spread. Finding how the specific trait, whether that can be abnormality or disease, how it is inherited using this pedigree analysis. So we'll start with autosomal recessive disorder. First we'll start with autosomal recessive disorder. So autosomal recessive disorder, we have first unaffected parents unaffected parents, when I say unaffected parents, they will be like a normal parent. Unaffected in the sense they can be a normal parent, or they can be carrier also. So both the ways they are unaffected. They are not affected. But what is the difference between normal parent and carrier parent? Normal parent, they won't have the gene which is causing the autosomal recessive disorder. But the carrier parent, which they will have the gene that causes the autosomal recessive disorder, but that gene will be a recessive type. So now, if they are going to be a normal parent, they will be homozygous dominant. If they are homozygous dominant, they are completely, they are not also carrier also. So if it is a carrier parent, they will be a heterozygous parent. Heterozygous parent mostly are the carrier type. So the parent is generally unaffected. Then how the affected child would be, affected individual will be, affected individual in the next generation, affected individual, either they can be son or daughter, should have what type of gene? Will have two recessive gene, meaning they will be homozygous recessive. So when we say autosomal diseases, autosomal means the trait is in the 22 autosomes, not related to X and Y sex chromosomes. So since that is the case, there is no priority that only the girls will get, only the boys will get in the family, the boys children or the girl children will get it. There is no priority because it is autosomes. Both of them will be equally affected. Male and female will be equally affected because it is happening in the 22 autosomes. Then, how do you understand? So, what are the examples of autosomal recessive disorder? So, the examples are sickle cell anemia, then we have this phenylketonuria, which are all recessive, autosomal recessive disorder. The autosomal recessive linked disorders are sickle cell anemia, phenylketonuria and thalassemia also. They are all autosomal linked recessive disorders, where thalassemia is autosomal recessive disorder only, but it is a blood disease. So, thalassemia is autosomal recessive disorder, but it is a blood disease. It's a blood disease. In autosomal dominant trait disorder, one parent is affected. Sure, one parent should be affected. So for that, so it says dominant, there should be one dominant gene is enough. One dominant gene is enough. So one parent is surely affected and the dominant gene is affected. So now, if it is an unaffected person, here if it is an unaffected person, they will look like they will be homozygous. So affected person, the parents are affected, no? So the affected person, it always be in a heterozygous condition. Affected person always a heterozygous condition. So what is the difference between the autosomal recessive, autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive? The parents are unaffected. Autosomal dominant, sure, one parent is affected. That is autosomal dominant disorder. So what is an example of autosomal dominant disorder? That is myotonic dystrophy. Myotonic dystrophy. This is an example of autosomal dominant trait. So X-linked recessive trait disorder, this comes under Mendelian disorder only, but which is sex-linked disorders. So here when I say we are talking about the X-linked, X related to the X chromosome, but it should be recessive. So what happens here? So this X-linked recessive disorder is most common in men. It's most common in men because they have only one X chromosome. Only one X chromosome they have. So because of this, if that one X chromosome is affected, they have the disorder. And in male, the male, either he will be affected, means the X chromosome is affected. X chromosome is affected. Or he will be unaffected. He will be unaffected. He will not be a carrier. He is not a carrier. In a sex-linked recessive disorder, a male cannot be a carrier. He can be either affected or unaffected. Then, if a female, if they want to be affected, if it is female affected, means what is the meaning? Both X chromosome should be affected. Both X chromosome should be affected. Both X chromosome should be affected. Then, if both the X chromosome are affected, they will be homozygous recessive. So this condition would be homozygous recessive. So they are going to pass on the disease or the disorder. Then if the female, they can be a carrier also. So for a carrier, then they will be in a heterozygous condition. One of the X will be affected. Then they become a unaffected, but they will be a carrier. So the important point in the X-linked recessive disorders are male are affected more than the female. Male affected more than female, and no father to son transmission. It's a very important understanding for solving the pedigree chart. So no father to son transmission in the case of sex-linked recessive disorder. So a son will not get, because why? Because son gets only Y chromosome from father. So but here we are saying X is affected, the X chromosome is affected. That is the reason it's called as X-linked recessive disorder. So once he gets only XY chromosome from father, so that is the reason there is no father to son transmission, but gets X from mother. So if mother is affected or carrier, the son will be affected. So the examples of X-linked recessive traits are color blindness and hemophilia. So do watch my next video for how to solve the pedigree analysis, the chart, using this knowledge of Mendelian disorders.